The gunshot echoed across the open plains of Arizona Territory. 1878. Like thunder announcing a storm. Grace Sullivan flinched at the sound, her young son and daughter huddling closer to her skirts as they stood beside the freshly dug grave. The local preacher's words blurred together as Grace stared at the wooden coffin being lowered into the unforgiving earth. Her husband Thomas, dead at 32, victim of a stagecoach robbery gone wrong. The life they'd built at Willow Creek Ranch now rested solely on her slender shoulders. "Mama, I'm scared," whispered 6-year-old Emma, her small hand clutching Grace's black morning dress. "Hush now," Grace murmured, running her trembling fingers through her daughter's golden curls. 8-year-old Michael stood silently beside them, his jaw clenched in a poor imitation of manhood. As the small gathering of townsfolk and neighboring ranchers dispersed, offering condolences that felt hollow against the vastness of her grief, Grace wondered how she would manage. The ranch needed constant attention, the cattle required tending, and winter approached with merciless certainty. A woman alone with 2 children had poor odds in this harsh territory. "Mrs. Sullivan." A deep voice pulled Grace from her thoughts. She turned to find Rylan Wade, hat in hand, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the afternoon sun. His weathered face showed genuine concern beneath the shadow of his hat. "I wanted to offer my condolences." Grace nodded stiffly. She knew Wade by reputation, a skilled horseman who drifted into Copper Springs last spring and taken work with various ranches. Thomas had hired him twice for cattle drives. "Thank you, Mr. Wade. If there's anything you need." He hesitated, eyes shifting to the children before returning to her face. "Thomas was a good man." "Yes, he was." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. Rylan nodded, his blue eyes softening. "Madam, I don't mean to intrude, but winter's coming. If you need help with the ranch." Pride surged through Grace's grief. "We'll manage, Mr. Wade. My husband taught me well." Rylan studied her for a moment, respect evident in his gaze. "I've no doubt, Mrs. Sullivan. Still, should you change your mind, I'm staying at Mabel's boarding house through the month." Grace watched him walk away, his tall frame straight and purposeful. Something about his quiet strength reminded her painfully of Thomas. She turned back to her children, forcing a brave smile. "Come along now. We have work to do." The ride back to Willow Creek Ranch was silent save for the creak of wagon wheels and the occasional sniffles from Emma. The modest 2-story house came into view as they crested the final hill, and Grace felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on her shoulders. The cattle dotted the pastures, the barn needed repairs, and according to Thomas's ledger, they'd need to sell at least 30 head before winter to make ends meet. That night, after tucking the children into bed with whispered assurances that angels were watching over their father, Grace sat alone at the kitchen table. Thomas's account books spread before her. She confronted the harsh reality of their situation. The ranch was mortgaged, feed prices were rising, and the upcoming cattle drive to the railroad in Tucson would require experienced hands she couldn't afford to hire. 3 days later, a fierce autumn storm swept across the valley. Grace awoke to water pouring through a section of the roof Thomas had planned to repair. By dawn, she was balancing precariously on a ladder, hammer in hand, while the children handed up shingles from below. "Mama, someone's coming," Michael called, pointing toward the main road. Grace squinted through the rain to see a lone rider approaching. As he drew closer, she recognized Rylan Wade, his duster billowing behind him. "Mrs. Sullivan," he called, dismounting in one fluid motion. "What in heaven's name are you doing up there in this weather?" "What does it look like, Mr. Wade?" Grace called back, driving another nail with perhaps more force than necessary. "The roof won't fix itself." Rylan tied his horse to the hitching post and strode toward the house. "Madam, with all due respect, you'll break your neck. Please, let me help." Grace hesitated. Pride warred with practicality as another gust of wind nearly knocked her sideways. "Please, Mama," Emma pleaded. "Your dress is getting all wet." With a sigh, Grace descended the ladder. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Wade, but I can't pay you. I'm not asking for payment." He removed his duster and handed it to Michael. "I was riding by on my way to the Wilson place and saw you up there. Couldn't in good conscience continue on." Grace studied him, searching for ulterior motives but finding only sincere concern. "Very well, but just the roof." Rylan nodded and climbed the ladder with ease, his movements sure and practiced. Grace ushered the children inside to prepare hot coffee, glancing back to watch him work. There was something reassuring about his presence, a steadiness that reminded her of better days. When the rain finally subsided, Rylan had not only patched the roof, but also repaired the loose porch railing and fixed the stuck pump handle by the horse trough. Grace insisted he stay for supper, the least she could offer for his help. "This is mighty fine stew, Mrs. Sullivan," Rylan said, accepting a second helping. "Thank you." Grace watched as Emma chatted animatedly with their guest, describing her collection of carved wooden animals Thomas had made for her. Michael, initially suspicious, now listened intently as Rylan described breaking wild mustangs in Nevada territory. "Will you tell us a story, Mr. Wade?" Emma asked when the meal was finished. "Emma, Mr. Wade likely has places to be," Grace admonished gently. "Actually, I don't." Rylan smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "And I do know a tale or two about a clever coyote that outwitted a mountain lion." As the children gathered around, Grace cleared the table, listening to Rylan's rich voice weave the story. His easy way with the children surprised her. Most drifting cowboys she'd encountered were rough men with rough tongues, but Rylan showed a gentleness that belied his rugged appearance. Later, after the children were asleep, Grace offered him a final cup of coffee before his ride back to town. "Mrs. Sullivan," Rylan began, his hat in his hands, "I couldn't help but notice your south pasture fence is down in several places. Your cattle could wander onto Blackwood land if it's not fixed." Grace sighed. "I'm aware. It's on my list along with a dozen other repairs." "I could help," he offered. "Not asking for money, just—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Thomas once did me a good turn. I'd like to repay that debt." Grace raised an eyebrow. "What sort of good turn?" 2 years back, I was in a bad way after a mining accident in Colorado. Your husband gave me work when others wouldn't look twice at a man with a busted arm who couldn't prove his worth." Rylan's eyes held genuine gratitude. "I never forgot that kindness." Grace considered his words. Thomas had never mentioned this, but it sounded like him always willing to give someone a chance. Still, she was wary. "Mr. Wade, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept charity. This ranch is my responsibility now. Not charity, Mrs. Sullivan. Consider it payment of a debt." He set his cup down. "I'll come by tomorrow to fix that fence. After that, if you want me gone, I'll ride out and not bother you again." Against her better judgment, Grace nodded. "Very well, Mr. Wade. Tomorrow." True to his word, Rylan arrived at dawn the next day. Grace watched from the kitchen window as he unloaded tools from his saddlebags and set to work on the fence line. By midday, Michael had joined him, eagerly holding nails and learning how to stretch wire between posts. For 3 days, Rylan worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing fences, strengthening the barn roof, and mending the corral gate. Each evening, Grace insisted he stay for supper, and each evening, the children grew more attached to his presence. She found herself watching the easy way he showed Michael how to whittle, or how patiently he listened to Emma's stories about her doll. On the 4th day, As Grace hung laundry on the line, she heard hoofbeats approaching, too many for just one rider. She turned to see 3 men on horseback, the one in front all too familiar. "Mrs. Sullivan," called Franklin Blackwood, the neighboring rancher who'd been trying to buy Willow Creek since before Thomas's death. "Fine day, isn't it?" "Mr. Blackwood," Grace acknowledged coldly. "What brings you to my property?" Blackwood's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just being neighborly. Noticed you've got yourself some help." His gaze shifted to where Rylan worked on the chicken coop, hammer in hand. "Interesting choice of handyman." "My affairs are not your concern," Grace replied. "Perhaps not." Blackwood dismounted, his expensive boots raising dust. "But when my cattle start disappearing and I hear tell of a known rustler working neighboring land, it becomes my concern." Grace stiffened. "What are you implying?" "Just that your new friend there has quite the reputation in some circles." Blackwood adjusted his leather gloves. "I'd hate to see a widow taken advantage of by an unsavory character." "I suggest you leave, Mr. Blackwood." Rylan's voice came from behind Grace. He stood there, hammer still in hand, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard. Blackwood's smile widened. "Wade, heard you were working odd jobs. Quite a step down from running with the Collier gang, isn't it?" Grace's eyes widened. The Collier gang had terrorized parts of Arizona and New Mexico for years before most were captured or killed 2 years ago. "You heard wrong," Rylan said evenly. "Now, unless you have actual business here, I suggest you move along." Blackwood chuckled. "Mrs. Sullivan, my offer to buy this ranch still stands. $5,000 is more than fair, considering." His eyes traveled meaningfully to the children watching from the porch. "Considering how difficult it must be for a woman alone." "I'm not alone," Grace said firmly. "And I'm not selling. Not to you, not to anyone. Suit yourself." Blackwood mounted his horse. "But do be careful about the company you keep. Some men leave nothing but trouble in their wake." With that, he and his men rode off, dust billowing behind them. Grace turned to Rylan, questions forming on her lips, but he spoke first. "I should explain." His voice was tight. "Not here, though." After sending the children inside with chores, Grace led Rylan to the shade of the oak tree behind the house. "Were you part of the Collier gang?" she asked directly. Rylan sighed, removing his hat. "No, but my younger brother was. I spent 2 years tracking him, trying to get him out before he got himself killed." His eyes met hers steadily. "I was too late. He died in a shootout with marshals near Tucson. Some folks saw me with him before it happened. Assumed I was part of it." "And were you part of it?" "No, madam. I've done my share of wrong in this life, but never rode with outlaws." He twisted his hat in his hands. "After my brother died, I drifted. That's when I met Thomas. He didn't ask questions, just gave me honest work when I needed it." Grace studied him, weighing his words against the trust Thomas had shown him. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Would you have let me help if I had?" He gestured toward the house. "Most folks hear even a whisper of connection to the Colliers and want nothing to do with me. Can't say I blame them." Grace considered this. "Blackwood wants my land. He's not above spreading lies to get it." "That may be true, but what I told you isn't a lie." Rylan put his hat back on. "I understand if you want me to leave." Grace thought of the repairs still needed, the cattle that required moving to winter pasture, the children who had begun to smile again in Rylan's presence. "No," she decided. "I need help, and you've proven yourself trustworthy these past days. But no more secrets, Mr. Wade." Relief flickered across his face. "No more secrets, Mrs. Sullivan." That evening, supper was quieter than usual, the children sensing the tension between the adults. After they were asleep, Grace found Rylan on the porch, smoking a cigarette and staring at the star-filled sky. "I've been thinking," she said, wrapping her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "The cattle need to be moved to the north pasture before the first frost, and I'll need help with the drive to Tucson next month if we're to make enough money for winter." Rylan extinguished his cigarette. "You want me to stay on? As a hired hand, yes." Grace met his gaze firmly. "I can't pay much room and board, plus a small share of the cattle sale. That's more than fair." He hesitated. "Mrs. Sullivan, about Blackwood, he's not the kind of man to give up easily. My presence here might make things worse for you. This is my land, Mr. Wade. I decide who stays and who goes." Her voice softened. "Besides, the children have taken quite a shine to you." A small smile touched his lips. "They're good kids. You've done well with them." "Thank you." Grace was surprised by how much his simple praise affected her. "I should turn in. We have an early start tomorrow." As October turned to November, Rylan became a fixture at Willow Creek. Under his guidance, Michael learned to ride properly and help with the cattle. Emma shadowed him around the property, peppering him with endless questions that he answered with remarkable patience. The broken things around the ranch were mended one by one, and Grace found herself watching Rylan when he wasn't looking the way sunlight caught in his dark hair. How his smile transformed his entire face when he laughed with the children. One evening, as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep, Grace found herself sharing stories of her life before Arizona, her childhood in Missouri, meeting Thomas when he came east to buy horses, their journey west with all their possessions in one wagon. "We were so young," she mused. "Barely 20, filled with dreams of building something lasting." "You did build something lasting," Rylan said quietly. "This ranch, those children, that's Thomas's legacy." Grace studied him in the lantern light. "What about you, Rylan? What brings a man to spend his life drifting from place to place?" He was silent for a long moment. "After my parents died, there wasn't much to hold me anywhere. My brother Jake was the only family I had left. When he fell in with bad company." He shrugged. "Suppose I never found a reason to put down roots after that. No wife? No sweetheart waiting somewhere?" A sad smile touched his lips. "There was someone once. Long time ago in Kansas. She married a banker while I was away fighting in the war." Grace nodded, understanding the pain of paths not taken. "The war changed many things for many people." "That it did." He looked at her directly. "You could still sell to Blackwood, you know. Take the money, move somewhere easier. Give the children a different life." "This is their home," Grace said firmly. "Everything Thomas and I built together is here. Every memory, every dream we shared." She gestured to the land around them, silvered by moonlight. "I won't give that up without a fight." Rylan's expression softened. "Then we'd better make sure you win that fight." The first frost came earlier than expected, coating the grass with crystalline white and sending them scrambling to move the cattle to sheltered pasture. Grace rode alongside Rylan, her skills with horses nearly matching his own. They worked in comfortable tandem, communicating with nods and gestures developed over weeks of shared labor. "You're a natural at this," Rylan commented as they watched the last stragglers join the main herd. Grace laughed, her breath visible in the cold air. "Hardly. Thomas spent years teaching me. Said a rancher's wife needed to ride as well as any man." "Smart man." Rylan's gaze lingered on her flushed face. "You love it, though. I can see it when you're on horseback." "I do." She smiled, surprised by how easy it had become to smile again. "It's freedom, isn't it? Just you and the horse and open country." "Exactly that." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary before he looked away. "We should head back. Storm's brewing." The snow began as they reached the barn, fat flakes swirling in the wind. By nightfall, a full blizzard raged outside, howling around the eaves of the house. The children huddled near the fireplace, wide-eyed at nature's fury. "Will the cattle be all right?" Michael asked worriedly. "They'll be fine," Rylan assured him. "They know how to bunch together for warmth, and the north pasture has those stands of pine for shelter." "What about the horses?" Emma piped up. "Snug in the barn," Grace told her, bringing mugs of hot chocolate to the children. "Just like we're snug in here." Later, after the children were asleep, Grace found herself unable to rest. The storm's intensity had increased, rattling windows and sending drafts through the house. She stoked the fire and was checking the windows when a particularly strong gust blew the back door open, sending snow swirling into the kitchen. Grace struggled against the wind to close it, finally succeeding with a burst of effort. As she turned to clean up the snow, she found Rylan in the doorway, a lantern in his hand. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Heard the door from the bunk room. Just the wind," she explained, brushing snow from her nightdress and wrapper. "I didn't mean to wake you. I wasn't sleeping." He set the lantern down and helped her mop up the melting snow. "Storm like this makes me restless." Grace understood. She'd felt the same way since Thomas died, a constant unease, as if waiting for the next disaster. "Would you like some tea? I'm not likely to sleep either." They sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from their cups, the storm's fury providing an oddly intimate background to their quiet conversation. Grace found herself studying Rylan's hands, strong, capable hands that had fixed so much around her home. "You're staring, Mrs. Sullivan," he said softly. "Grace," she corrected him. "After all this time, I think you can call me Grace." A smile touched his lips. "Grace, then." Something in the way he said her name sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the tea. She looked away, suddenly conscious of her nightclothes and loose hair. "Tell me about your travels. The children love your stories, but I suspect you keep the more interesting ones for adult ears." Rylan chuckled. "Not as many exciting tales as they might hope. Mostly just hard work in different places." But he obliged her, describing cattle drives through tornado country, a stint panning for gold in Colorado, a winter spent with a Ute tribe when snow stranded him in the mountains. "You've lived more in your 40 years than most men do in a lifetime," Grace observed. 38, he corrected with a smile. "And living isn't just about seeing different places. It's about building something that matters." His eyes met hers across the table. "Like you and Thomas did here." Grace felt a now familiar pang at her husband's name. "We had good years. Not enough of them, but they were good." "He was lucky to have you," Rylan said quietly. "Some men search their whole lives and never find a woman with your kind of strength." Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks at the unexpected praise. "It's late. We should try to sleep." Rylan nodded, rising from the table. "Good night, Grace." As she lay in bed listening to the storm, Grace acknowledged the feelings she'd been avoiding for weeks. Attraction, yes, but something deeper too, a connection she hadn't expected to feel again. The guilt came swiftly after. Thomas was barely 6 months in his grave. What kind of widow noticed another man's smile? His hands, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her children. Her children. The thought sobered her. They needed stability, not complications. Rylan was a drifter by his own admission. When spring came, would he move on like he always had? And if he stayed, what then? The town already whispered about the widow Sullivan and her hired hand. Emma and Michael were growing attached to him. If she allowed herself to do the same, what would it cost them all when he eventually left? The blizzard lasted 3 days, keeping them housebound and in close quarters. Grace found herself increasingly aware of Rylan's presence, the scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the deep rumble of his laughter when Emma told her fanciful stories, the gentle patience he showed teaching Michael to play checkers. On the third evening, when the storm finally began to abate, Grace stood at the window watching the snow slow to gentle flakes. Rylan joined her, his reflection appearing beside hers in the glass. "Should be clear by morning," he observed. "I'll need to check the cattle, make sure none strayed during the worst of it." "I'll come with you," Grace said. "The children can stay with Mrs. Abernathy in town. I've been meaning to pick up supplies anyway." Rylan nodded, then hesitated. "Grace, there's something I should tell you." His expression was serious in the firelight. "I ran into Sheriff Colton in town before the storm. He mentioned riders asking questions about me in Tucson. Former associates of the Collier gang, from the description." Grace turned to face him. "Are you in danger?" "Maybe. More likely they're just curious about someone connected to the gang." He sighed. "But if they come this way, it could mean trouble for you and the children." "What are you saying?" "That perhaps it's time I moved on." The words seemed to cost him. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door." Grace felt a cold that had nothing to do with the weather. "Is that what you want?" "To leave." "What I want." He stopped, his gaze dropping to the floor before meeting hers again. "What I want doesn't matter. Your safety does. The children's safety." "It matters to me," Grace said quietly. "What you want matters to me, Rylan." Something shifted in his expression. He took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Grace, Mama." Emma's voice came from the stairway. "I had a bad dream." The moment broke. Rylan stepped back, and Grace turned to her daughter. "I'm coming, sweetheart." When she returned downstairs after settling Emma, Rylan had gone to the bunk room, the moment whatever it might have been lost to the night. The morning dawned clear and blindingly bright. The snow-covered landscape transformed into a sea of sparkling white. After arranging for the children to stay with Mrs. Abernathy, Grace and Rylan set out on horseback to check the herd. The cold air stung Grace's cheeks as they rode, but the exertion and sunshine soon warmed her. They found the cattle huddled in the lee of a pine grove, all present and seemingly unharmed by the storm. As they turned to head back, Rylan suddenly reined his horse to a stop, his posture alert. "What is it?" Grace asked. "Riders. Coming fast." He pointed to the ridge where 3 mounted figures had appeared, moving rapidly in their direction. "Blackwood's men." Grace squinted against the glare. "No." Rylan's voice was tight. "Stay behind me, Grace." The riders approached, and Grace saw Rylan's hand move to the pistol at his hip. As they drew closer, she could make out 3 rough-looking men, heavily armed, their faces obscured by scarves against the cold. "Well, if it ain't Rylan Wade," called the lead rider as they circled around them. "Long time no see." "Haskell." Rylan nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "Didn't expect to find you in these parts." The man named Haskell grinned, revealing a gold tooth. "Been looking for you, actually. When Jeb Collins got out of Yuma prison, he had some interesting tales about money from that bank job in Nogales. Money that went missing after your brother got himself killed. I told Collier then, and I'm telling you now, I don't know anything about any money." Rylan's voice remained calm, but Grace could see the tension in his shoulders. Haskell's eyes shifted to Grace. "And who's this pretty thing?" "New partner in crime, Wade. This is Mrs. Sullivan. She owns this ranch where I work as a hired hand." Rylan's tone hardened. "She has nothing to do with any of this. Is that right?" Haskell's smile turned predatory. "Well, Mrs. Sullivan, you should know you're harboring a thief. Rylan here helped his brother hide $20,000 from the Nogales job, then played innocent when the law came calling." "That's a lie," Rylan said flatly. My brother died before he could tell anyone where that money went, if it exists at all. See, that's what's been bothering me. Haskell leaned forward on his saddle. Jake Wade wasn't the type to die without making sure his big brother was taken care of. And you weren't the type to let good money go to waste. His hand moved to his gun. So how about you tell us where it is? And we'll be on our way? Grace watched Rylan's face, searching for any sign that these accusations might be true. His eyes met hers briefly, filled with apology but not guilt. There is no money, Rylan said evenly. And this is private property. I suggest you move along before the local sheriff gets involved. Haskell laughed. Sheriff's a half-day's ride from here. Lot can happen in that time. He nodded to his companions, who spread out slightly. We can do this easy or hard, Wade. Your choice. Grace saw Rylan calculating their odds, 3 armed men against 1, with her safety to consider. She subtly shifted her hand toward the rifle in her saddle holster. All right, Rylan said finally. But not here. The money's hidden back at the ranch house. I'll take you there, but the lady stays here. Nice try. Haskell shook his head. Lady comes too. Insurance, you might say. What happened next unfolded so quickly Grace barely had time to react. Rylan suddenly spurred his horse forward, directly at Haskell, while shouting, "Run!" to Grace. Gunshots exploded in the clear air as Grace wrenched her horse around and galloped toward a nearby copse of trees, ducking low over the saddle. She heard more shots behind her and risked a glance back to see Rylan exchanging fire with the outlaws as he followed her. One of Haskell's men slumped in his saddle. They reached the trees and Rylan quickly dismounted, pulling Grace down beside him. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his hands checking her shoulders, arms. "No, I'm fine." Grace's heart hammered in her chest. "You're bleeding." A dark stain spread across Rylan's left sleeve. "Just a graze. Listen to me, Grace. Take my horse, he's faster. Ride for town and get the sheriff. I'm not leaving you here with those men. You have to." He pressed his pistol into her hand. "The children need you. Go now while they're regrouping." Grace stared at him, torn between fear and something deeper that constricted her chest. "Rylan, go!" He pushed her toward his horse, helping her mount. "I'll hold them off, buy you time." With one last desperate look at him, Grace dug her heels into the horse's flanks and burst from the trees, riding hard toward town. Behind her, gunfire erupted again. She refused to look back, focusing only on the path ahead, the horse's powerful strides eating up the distance. She had gone perhaps a mile when a bullet whizzed past her ear. One of the riders had followed. Grace crouched lower, urging the horse to greater speed, but her pursuer was gaining. When the next shot came, she made a split-second decision, reining the horse sharply behind a rock outcropping. As the rider came around the bend, she steadied Rylan's pistol with both hands and fired. The outlaw tumbled from his saddle with a cry. His horse galloped past, riderless. Grace approached cautiously, pistol still raised, but the man lay motionless, her bullet having found its mark in his chest. Taking a shuddering breath, she remounted and continued her desperate ride to town. Sheriff Colton and 4 deputies rode out immediately upon hearing her story. Grace insisted on accompanying them despite the sheriff's objections. The return journey seemed endless, fear for Rylan growing with every passing minute. They found him a quarter-mile from where she'd left him, slumped against a tree with his empty revolver beside him. Blood matted his hair and soaked his shirt, but he was conscious, a grim smile touching his lips when he saw Grace. "Told you to go to town," he managed. "I did," she replied, kneeling beside him. "I came back." Sheriff Colton reported that they'd found Haskell dead near the cattle herd. The 3rd man had escaped but was wounded. As they carefully loaded Rylan into a wagon, Grace held his hand, refusing to let go even when they reached town and the doctor took over. For 3 days, Rylan hovered between life and death, fever raging through him from an infected bullet wound in his side. Grace barely left his bedside in the small room above the doctor's office, sending Mrs. Abernathy home with the children only after they'd been allowed to see that Rylan was alive. On the 4th night, his fever broke. Grace, dozing in a chair beside his bed, woke to find him watching her, his eyes clear for the first time in days. "You stayed," he said hoarsely. Grace moved to sit on the edge of the bed, helping him sip water. "Of course I stayed. Haskell, dead. The sheriff says the 3rd man crossed into New Mexico territory. They've sent word to authorities there." She set the water down. "Why didn't you tell me about the money?" Rylan sighed. "Because I don't know anything about it. Jake never told me where it was, if it exists at all. Collier always believed I was lying." "I believe you," Grace said simply. Something in his expression softened. "Thank you for that." He reached for her hand, his grip weak but warm. "I'm sorry I brought this trouble to you. You saved my life out there," she reminded him. "And you saved mine." A shadow crossed his face. "Grace, when I'm well enough to travel, I should move on. There could be others like Haskell." Grace felt a now familiar pain at the thought of his leaving. "Is that still what you want? To leave?" Rylan was silent for a long moment. "I've been drifting so long. I'm not sure I know how to stay in one place anymore." His thumb moved gently over her knuckles. "But I've never wanted to try as much as I do now." The words hung between them, full of meaning neither was quite ready to voice. Grace squeezed his hand. "Then try, Rylan. Stay at least until you're fully healed. We can figure out the rest as it comes." By Christmas, Rylan had recovered enough to return to Willow Creek, though the doctor warned that his strength would take months to fully return. The children welcomed him home with unbridled excitement, showing him the decorations they'd made and the small tree set up in the parlor. Grace watched them together, her heart full. Something had changed during those days she'd kept vigil by his sickbed, a recognition of feelings too strong to ignore any longer. Still, she hesitated to put those feelings into words. The ranch was struggling financially, the cattle sale having been delayed by Rylan's injury and the early winter, and beneath it all, uncertainty remained about what Rylan truly wanted. On Christmas Eve, after the children had hung their stockings and gone to bed with excited whispers, Grace and Rylan sat before the fire, the house quiet around them. "I have something for you," Rylan said, reaching into his pocket. He handed her a small wooden box, beautifully carved with wildflowers. "Made it while I was recovering. Not much, but it's beautiful," Grace interrupted, running her fingers over the intricate design. She opened it to find a delicate silver chain with a small turquoise pendant. "Rylan, this is too much." "It was my mother's," he explained. "Only thing of hers I kept all these years. I'd like you to have it." Grace looked up at him, startled by the gift's significance. "I can't accept this. Please." He took the necklace and moved to fasten it around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin. "I've been thinking a lot these past weeks. About staying. About what that might mean." Grace's heart quickened. "And what have you decided?" "That I'm tired of drifting. That for the first time in my life, I found somewhere someone worth staying for." His eyes held hers, vulnerable yet certain. "If you'll have me." "The children have grown so attached to you," Grace said softly. "And I to them." He took her hands in his. "But it's not just them, Grace. It's you. It's been you for months now, though I tried to deny it out of respect for Thomas, for your grief." Grace felt tears well in her eyes. "I felt so guilty, for noticing you, for caring. It seemed too soon." "There's no proper time for healing," Rylan said gently. "Thomas loved you. He'd want you to be happy, to be cared for. And you? What do you want? I want to build something lasting. Here, with you and the children. His voice deepened with emotion. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to watch Michael and Emma grow up, teach them everything I know. I want to stand beside you through whatever comes. Grace's tears spilled over. I want that too. So much it frightens me. Rylan reached up to brush away her tears. Then let me stay, Grace. Not as your hired hand. As your partner. In time, perhaps as more, if you'll have me. Yes? She whispered, leaning into his touch. Stay, Rylan. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as she responded, years of loneliness dissolving in the warmth between them. When they finally parted, breathless, Grace rested her forehead against his. Merry Christmas, Grace, he murmured. Merry Christmas, Rylan. The months that followed brought changes to Willow Creek Ranch. With Rylan's full recovery came innovations: irrigation ditches that increased their grazing land, new breeding stock that improved their herd, a repaired windmill that eased the burden of hauling water. The children blossomed under his attentions, Michael following him everywhere and Emma delighting in the stories he told each evening. Spring brought not only new calves but also rumors that Franklin Blackwood had expanded his operations, buying out 2 neighboring ranches. Grace worried as reports reached them of small homesteaders being pressured to sell, sometimes with tactics that bordered on intimidation. He'll come for Willow Creek eventually, she told Rylan one evening as they walked the property line. He's determined to control the whole valley. Let him try, Rylan replied, his arm around her waist. This land is Sullivan land. It will stay that way. Grace looked up at him, struck by the determination in his voice. Over the past 5 months, Rylan had become as invested in the ranch as she was, working tirelessly to make it profitable. The spring cattle drive to Tucson had brought their best price yet, allowing them to pay down a significant portion of the mortgage. Sullivan land, she repeated thoughtfully. Rylan, we need to talk about something. He raised an eyebrow. Sounds serious. It is. She took a deep breath. People talk, in town, at church, about us living here together. Let them talk, he said dismissively. We know the truth. The truth is that I love you, Grace said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken the words aloud, though they'd been in her heart for months. And the children love you. You've become family to us. Rylan's expression softened. And I love all of you, more than I thought possible. Then marry me, Grace said simply. Make this arrangement proper in the eyes of the town, and make this family truly yours. Surprise. Then joy spread across Rylan's face. Aren't I supposed to be the one asking? Grace laughed. Since when have we done things the conventional way? Rylan pulled her close. Grace Sullivan, nothing would make me happier than to be your husband. But are you certain? It's only been a year since Thomas. I'll always love Thomas, Grace said honestly. He gave me Michael and Emma, this ranch, years of happiness. But my heart has room for new love too. She touched his face. You've taught me that. Rylan kissed her then, a promise sealed beneath the wide Montana sky. When they returned to the house, they shared their news with the children, who received it with excited shouts and, in Emma's case, joyful tears. Does this mean you'll be our papa now? She asked Rylan. Rylan knelt to her level, his expression serious. I could never replace your father, Emma. He was a good man who loved you very much. He glanced at Michael, including him in his words. But if you'll let me, I'll love you like you're my own. I'll care for you, protect you, and be the best father I can be to you both. Michael, normally so stoic, surprised them all by throwing his arms around Rylan's neck. We want you to stay forever, the boy mumbled against his shoulder. That's the plan, partner, Rylan assured him. his voice thick with emotion. That's the plan. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Copper Springs. Mrs. Abernathy helped Grace fashion a new dress of pale blue, and Emma carried wildflowers gathered that morning. Michael stood proudly beside Rylan, chest puffed out in his Sunday best. The whole town turned out, curiosity about the widow Sullivan's rapid remarriage overcome by genuine affection for the family. Even Sheriff Colton attended, having formed a friendship with Rylan during the investigation into Haskell's gang. As they exchanged vows, Grace felt the rightness of the moment settle over her. This wasn't the life she'd imagined as a young bride 8 years ago, but it was a good life, one built on mutual respect, shared goals, and deep love. That night, after the children were asleep, Grace and Rylan stood on the porch of what was now their home, watching stars appear in the velvet sky. "Happy, Mrs. Wade?" Rylan asked, his arms around her from behind. "Very," she assured him, leaning back against his chest. "And you? Any regrets about giving up your wandering ways?" "Not a single one." He kissed her temple. "Turns out all that wandering was just looking for the right place to call home." Summer brought long days of work and warm evenings on the porch. The ranch prospered under their joint care, and Grace found herself happier than she thought possible after Thomas's death. Rylan proved to be not only a dedicated rancher but a loving husband and father, patient with the children's questions and generous with his time despite the endless demands of the land. In August, Franklin Blackwood made his move. He arrived at Willow Creek with 3 of his men, ostensibly for a social call but with clear intentions. "I'll be direct, Mrs. Wade," he said, declining Grace's offer of coffee. "I'm prepared to offer $7,000 for this place. That's $2,000 more than my last offer, and considerably more than it's worth." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood, but Willow Creek isn't for sale," Grace replied calmly. "At any price." Blackwood's smile tightened. "Perhaps your new husband has different ideas? After all, he's relatively new to ranching." "My wife speaks for both of us," Rylan said, entering from the kitchen. "The ranch isn't for sale." Blackwood studied him. "You know, Wade, I've been making inquiries about you. Interesting history you have." "Ancient history," Rylan countered. "Is there something else we can help you with today, Blackwood?" "We've got cattle to tend." The rancher stood, his pleasant facade dropping. "You should reconsider my offer. The railroad's coming through the South Valley next year. Those who control the water rights will control everything." He gestured toward their land. "This place will be worthless without access to the creek." "Is that a threat?" Grace asked sharply. "Just a business observation." Blackwood settled his hat on his head. "Think about it. My offer won't stay open indefinitely." After he left, Grace and Rylan discussed his implied threat. The creek that gave their ranch its name originated on Blackwood land before flowing through their property. If he diverted it upstream, their cattle would suffer. "We need allies," Rylan decided. Other ranchers concerned about Blackwood's expansion. They spent the next weeks reaching out to neighboring operations, building a coalition of small ranchers and farmers threatened by Blackwood's growing influence. Sheriff Colton, concerned about the potential for water disputes, suggested they consult a lawyer in Tucson about their water rights. The trip to Tucson in September served multiple purposes: selling cattle, consulting the lawyer, and purchasing supplies for winter. The children stayed with Mrs. Abernathy, excited for the rare opportunity to spend time in town. In Tucson, the lawyer confirmed what they'd hoped. Their deed included established water rights that Blackwood couldn't legally circumvent. Armed with this knowledge, they completed their business and headed home, both looking forward to reuniting with the children. They were a day's ride from Copper Springs when Grace first suspected something was wrong. "Smoke," she said, pointing to the horizon. "Too much for cook fires," Rylan's expression darkened as he studied the distant smudge against the blue sky. Could be a wildfire, but it's coming from the direction of Willow Creek, Grace finished, fear clutching at her heart. They pushed their horses hard, covering the remaining distance in record time. As they crested the final hill overlooking their valley, Grace's worst fears were confirmed. The ranch house was ablaze, flames leaping from the roof and windows. Smaller fires dotted the property, the barn, the bunkhouse, even the corral fences. The children, Grace gasped, spurring her horse toward town. Rylan matched her pace, his face grim with controlled fury. They found Michael and Emma safe at Mrs. Abernathy's. But their relief was short-lived as the elderly woman explained what had happened. 3 men rode up last night, she told them, her voice shaking with indignation. Said they were looking for the Wade children. I didn't like the look of them, so I claimed I was keeping my grandchildren while their parents were away. She patted Emma's head. They left. But this morning we heard about the fire at your place. Blackwood, Rylan growled. We don't know that for certain, Grace cautioned, though she suspected the same. Sheriff Colton organized a group to fight what remained of the fire, but by the time they reached Willow Creek, there was little left to save. The house was a smoldering ruin, the barn partially collapsed, and several head of cattle lay dead in the pasture, shot where they stood. Grace walked through the destruction in numb shock, the children clinging to her skirts. Rylan moved through the ruins with dangerous calm, examining tracks, speaking with the men who'd come to help. That night, they stayed at the boarding house in town, the children finally asleep after hours of tears and questions Grace struggled to answer. She found Rylan cleaning his pistol, his face set in hard lines she hadn't seen since the confrontation with Haskell. What are you planning? She asked quietly. Justice, he replied without looking up. Grace sat beside him on the narrow bed. Not revenge, Rylan. We don't know for certain Blackwood was behind this. Who else would gain from burning us out? He set the gun down, finally meeting her eyes. Everything we built, Grace. Everything you and Thomas built before that. Gone. Not everything. She took his hand. We have the children. We have each other. We have the land itself. She held his gaze. Promise me you won't do anything rash. Promise me. After a long moment, he nodded. I promise. But I won't let this stand, Grace. I can't. We won't, she agreed. But we'll do it right. The next morning brought unexpected support. Ranchers and farmers from across the valley arrived in town, offering help, lumber for rebuilding, cattle to replace those lost, hands to clear the destruction. Word had spread quickly, and Blackwood's methods had finally crossed a line that the community wouldn't tolerate. Sheriff Colton found tracks leading from Willow Creek to Blackwood land, and 3 of Blackwood's men were conspicuously absent when he rode out to question the rancher. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to convince most of the town where responsibility lay. 2 days later, as they began clearing debris from the house site, a rider approached from town. It was Walter Jenkins, the banker who held their mortgage. Mrs. Wade, Mr. Wade, he greeted them, dismounting. I've come about the mortgage. Grace's heart sank. With the house destroyed and cattle lost, meeting their payment would be nearly impossible. Mr. Jenkins, if you could give us some time. Actually, the banker interrupted. I've come to inform you that your mortgage has been paid in full. Rylan frowned. That's not possible. We still owed over $2,000. Jenkins reached into his saddlebag and withdrew an envelope. This arrived yesterday by special courier from Tucson. Inside was the exact remaining balance on your loan, along with instructions to transfer the deed free and clear to Grace and Rylan Wade. He handed the envelope to Grace. There's a letter for you as well. Grace opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a brief note in unfamiliar handwriting. Mrs. Wade, this money rightfully belongs to the family of Jacob Wade. His brother has found a better use for it than I ever could. May it help rebuild what was lost. A friend, Jake's money? Rylan breathed, reading over her shoulder. It was real after all. But who? Grace began. Doesn't matter, Rylan said firmly. What matters is that Willow Creek is ours free and clear. Blackwood can't touch us now. News of the paid mortgage spread quickly, adding to the mystery surrounding the Wade family. Speculation ran wild. Some claimed Rylan had been secretly wealthy all along. Others that Grace had discovered gold on their property. No one connected it to the long-forgotten Nogales bank robbery, and Rylan and Grace saw no reason to enlighten them. The rebuilding of Willow Creek began in earnest. The new house took shape through autumn, larger and sturdier than the original. Rylan insisted on a wider porch, more bedrooms, and modern conveniences that Thomas hadn't been able to afford. By Christmas, though not fully complete, it was habitable enough for the family to move back to their land. On Christmas Eve, a year to the day since Rylan had given Grace his mother's necklace, they gathered in their new home. The children placed ornaments on a small pine tree, their excitement at being home evident in their chatter. Grace watched them from the kitchen doorway, one hand absently touching the turquoise pendant that hadn't left her neck since he'd given it to her. Happy? Rylan asked, coming to stand beside her. Very, she assured him. Though I keep expecting to wake up and find it's all been a dream. Not a dream. He slipped an arm around her waist. Though I have been keeping something from you. Grace looked up in surprise. What? A Christmas gift. He guided her to the porch, where a new rocking chair sat waiting, a red bow tied to its arm. Made it myself. Thought you might need it soon. Grace ran her hand over the smooth wood, touched by the gesture. It's beautiful, Rylan. But why would I need it soon? His smile was gentle as he placed a hand on her still flat stomach. Call it a hunch. Grace's eyes widened. She'd suspected for weeks but hadn't found the right moment to share her suspicion. How did you know? You've been turning green at the smell of coffee, just like you told me Emma made you do. His eyes crinkled with happiness. Are you pleased? Pleased? Grace laughed, tears springing to her eyes. Rylan, I'm overjoyed. He pulled her close, his voice dropping to a whisper. I never thought I'd have this, Grace. A home, a family, a child of my own blood. He touched her face reverently. You've given me everything I never knew I wanted. As you've given me, she replied, a second chance at happiness. Security for my children. She kissed him softly. Our children. Our children, he repeated, the words a promise. I'll love them like they're mine, and love you most of all. In May, as wildflowers carpeted the hills around Willow Creek, Grace gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Rylan's mother. The baby arrived with a full head of dark hair like her father's and Grace's determined chin, a perfect blend of them both. Franklin Blackwood left the territory that same month. His empire crumbling after 3 of his men were arrested for arson and cattle rustling. The small ranchers' alliance Rylan and Grace had helped form purchased most of his land, dividing it fairly among those who had suffered from his tactics. By Sarah's first birthday, Willow Creek Ranch had fully recovered from the fire. The new house stood proud on the hillside, the barn was filled with healthy stock, and the pastures teemed with cattle. Michael, now 12, had developed into a skilled young horseman under Rylan's tutelage. 10-year-old Emma showed a surprising talent for numbers, keeping the ranch books with her mother's guidance. On a warm summer evening, as Sarah took her first tentative steps across the porch her father had built, Grace reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of grief to the heights of joy, from uncertainty to security, from loneliness to love, the path had been neither straight nor easy, but every step had led them home. Rylan caught their daughter as she tumbled forward, swinging her high into the air to delighted giggles. Emma and Michael joined them on the porch, and as the sun set over the mountains, casting golden light across their land, Grace knew with absolute certainty that this family, this home, this love was everything she'd ever needed. "What are you thinking about?" Rylan asked later, as they sat together in the twilight after the children were asleep. "How different everything is from 2 years ago," Grace replied. "After Thomas died, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine being happy again." Rylan took her hand. "And now I know that life can give second chances." She leaned against his shoulder. "That love can come again, different but just as true." "I'll never replace Thomas," Rylan said quietly. "I wouldn't want to try." "You haven't replaced him. You've built something new with me." Grace looked up at her husband, this man who had drifted into her life when she needed him most. "Something just as strong, just as lasting." Rylan kissed her softly. "Forever, Grace. That's my promise to you. Whatever comes, wherever life takes us, I'm here to stay." As stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Grace Wade held tight to her husband's hand, secure in the knowledge that some wanderers eventually find their way home. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, they find much more than they ever dreamed possible.